Welcome to Invitation to the Cookout. Hey, before we get into it, let's take care of some business. Go ahead and hit that button. Like, share, subscribe. Each one reach one. What you tell them? Tell what?
Tell a friend and tell a friend.
Tell a friend and tell a friend. All right, we're on Apple. We're on Spotify. We like Dion. We ain't hard to find.
That's
all
right.
right? Yeah, we
That's
ain't hard
right.
to find. All right, you got your boy, Dapper Dom. Got my co-host, TheeAlexMac. Yeah. And in the studio with us today, we got a special guest, Miss Twilla Brooks, President and CEO of Lynette Create and Innovate, a consulting group that specializes in strategic planning, branding, PR, marketing, community relations. She's also an ex-Walmart executive in merchandising, as well as a chair of the African American Black Caucus, and also a very passionate Dodgers fan, Miss Twilla Brooks.
Hey,
Yeah. Clap it up. Yeah.
That's right. There you go.
I'm in my old Navy today.
Okay,
Yeah.
we didn't get the Dodger blue today.
Yeah.
That's all right, though.
Yes,
We
yes,
talked about it.
Yeah,
We hit it all.
so we appreciate you sitting down with us. When Alex and I was kind of first talking about like Women's History Month, like who do we want to have on the show? Like your name kind of popped up in my head first. One, I think like you're super dope and just one of the most down to earth and genuine people that I've had the pleasure of meeting. Now I was kind of merchandising a little bit when you were there, so I also know you got a switch you can flip. But I think though, that's what's great about you too. That like when you're pushing your people, like they don't take it personal because you built that relationship with them. So like that's number one, and number two, like you're highly successful. So just wanted to sit down and just kind of pick your brain, hear about your journey. And so we skip and chop it up today. We just gonna get to like what's on the grill today. And what's on the grill today is all about this lady to my right. We want to hear about where you're from, things you've done early on in your career, as well as your journey here to Northwest Arkansas, like what you're doing now. So take us back. So where are you from, Miss Brooks? Yeah.
Okay, so I grew up in Los Angeles, California. I went to Dorsey High School.
Okay.
So Dorsey, back in the day, I don't know if they will call it, but it was like in the inner city.
Okay.
But it was like the number one athletic high school in Southern California at the time. It's a little bit different now where they have a lot of private schools that do that, but it was one of the best public schools if you were an athlete and you were trying to get to college, or a lot of the guys back then, they were like not even worried about college. They were just trying to get into the NFL.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but it was also a really good academic school. So you had a great balance of where I was in the magnet program, but I was also an athlete.
Okay.
And so,
What sports did you play?
so I played softball.
Which that's how we met. By
That's
the way.
how we met. We played softball together.
Yeah.
Softball about 3-4 years together.
Yep.
So like that's how we
That's how we
originally
met.
connected. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. So I feel like sports brings everybody together.
Yes, absolutely.
And so, and then I went on to UC Santa Barbara, played in college for a little bit. And then my goal was to go to law school because, I think in the Black community back in the day, if you were graduating from college, it was like, well, where are you going next?
Yeah.
Are you going to be a lawyer? Are you going to be a doctor?
Yeah.
Are you going, and even back then, there weren't as many people getting their MBAs unless it was like a Juris Doctor in an MBA. So I was like, all right, I'll do a JD MBA crossover. And so, but I was studying for the LSATs for law school, and I ran into a friend in what we would call kind of like our community center, and I thought he was in law school. And he was like, nope, I decided not to go to law school. I said, but we were, you were pre-law. We were.
But yeah, we running. Yeah, this is the
ready
path
to
we was
go.
going forward. Yeah.
And I was like, well, what do you do now? And he was like, I'm an assistant buyer for a department store in Los Angeles called Robinson's May.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, all right, okay. Well, I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
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 And he was like, well, the recruiter's here. Well, why don't you come and talk to the recruiter? And I was like, I'm going to law school.
Yeah. Like.
But you know how, when you're Black, you always have a backup plan.
Yeah.
Right. You know what I mean? So I was like, all right, I met the recruiter, and he started telling me about it. And he was like, we really like you. You should come down to LA, do the interviews. But you also have to go through a series of testing. And I was like, what? So I had to do like 5 hours of testing.
Like what kind of testing? Like what?
Well, they make you take a math test to understand your competency.
Yeah.
There was a personality test, right? And then there was some type of potential test. But they do that I had to do that at Walmart. I had to do that in every company that I worked for as I ascended to the next.
Oh, like a retail combine around
Oh
here.
yeah, it's hardcore.
Yeah.
So and then I didn't necessarily get into the law school that I wanted to get into, and I didn't really know how I was going to pay for it because I went on a scholarship, and my parents did well, but they weren't like super. Yeah. So I was going to have to take out a bunch of loans. Yeah. And so I got into this thing where I think now they call it like a gap year. Yeah. But I was like, well, what if I work for a little bit, save up some money, and then if I don't like what I do, I could go back to law school. You know what I mean?
Well, at least you wanted to work. These kids now taking gap years. Just to explore and travel. Is like, well, what are you figuring out in this gap year? Yeah, but yeah.
Oh no, no. My family was very particular. Yeah. They were like, you can't live here. Like we've done what we've done. Yeah. Once you graduated from college, so you need to have a plan. Yeah. And so you can't come back here if you don't have a job or if you're not going somewhere else. Yeah. And so I mean, I think they would have, but they were very like, we've invested way too much. And I think they were like, my mom likes to say she was tired, right? Because I was the youngest of 4 kids. And she was like, I've done my job. But I figured, I guess there was no other path, right? So I guess if I didn't have a job and I was like these kids today, I'm sure they would be, but I don't know. With my mother, maybe not.
Yeah, okay. So, did you land a job in the same space or?
Yeah. Okay. So literally I did the interviews. So I met these guys in like April. Okay. And I had to go through a series of interviews, do the testing, and I got the job. So I knew before I even graduated from college that I had a job. Yeah. And then in California it's a little bit different. So like you graduate in June. So I literally graduated like June 16th. Had to pack up, move down to LA, find an apartment, and I started there with them July 2nd. Yeah.
Now, did you like fall in love with it immediately? Did you kind of like, this is what I know, what I want to do? How was that journey?
I don't know if I fell in love with it immediately. Yeah. I knew that I had never seen a lot of Black people that looked like me in a professional setting. Yeah. And I knew it was something that I wanted to aspire to be. Okay. I didn't necessarily know all the answers. Yeah. I didn't really know like how to dress or what to do, but I've always been, and hopefully this will be a threat, there's always been someone who has kind of picked me or been like my mentor to kind of show me the way. Yeah. And ironically, my buyer was a lady named Nancy Case. Okay. And she had graduated from UC Santa Barbara. Oh. And for the last 7 years, she's been getting what we were calling an executive trainee, and they were all from Santa Barbara. Okay. So she took me under her wing, and then she had an assistant, and then they also had an executive assistant, and they basically told me how to do everything. Okay. Because I didn't really know how to do anything. Yeah. And she worked for Martha Withers, who still to this day has been a thread in my life, who I don't know why she really liked me, but then eventually it kind of came out. Her husband was African American, and her children were of mixed race. Yeah. Okay. And I reminded her of her daughter, but it was more of what the path that she wanted her daughter to go, and she didn't necessarily. So so I think a lot of people say, how did I get to where I am today? There's always been people in my life that have kind of, like, first of all, I say that it's a combination of hard work. Obviously, I feel like the man above has got me. Yeah, for sure. And, but then also luck. Yeah. Yeah. And so, but there's always been someone kind of, because I'll tell you, I was a fish out of water. Yeah. I didn't really know how to dress.
Did you have any imposter syndrome? Like,
100%.
Okay.
And still up until my career all the way up until, people are like, oh, wow, you were vice president. But half the time you don't know what you're doing, right? And then when I started my own company, and still to this day, I get hired to do things, and people are like, well, can you do da-da-da-da-da-da? And I was like, well, I don't know how to do that. But I'll figure it out. But that's another thing about me is, and I think you know this about me, is you won't ever, I'm not a very good liar, so I just don't.
Yeah.
Right? But I will be like, if someone asks me, do you know how to do something? I'll say, I don't. But I'm damn willing to try to figure out how to do it. So I've always been very adaptable. And so you have to balance your life of being adaptable versus losing who you are versus aspiring into who you know you should be. Does that make sense?
It does.
She put a lot on that. She put a lot on that.
A lot of it crosses over. And I think during COVID is when I really had an aha moment of where you go through life, especially when you're in corporate America, and you get in this race of, all right, you need to get to this because this is what you see, right? You see people making more money, you see people ascending, and they tell you that this is what it's supposed to, this is where you're supposed to be. And I had been you saw it, like getting promoted, where it was always somebody that was a mentor of mine or someone that was like, all right, I'm going to push her through. They're like, all right, you're going to go do this. And I was like, all right, I'm going to take this money, I'm going to do this, I'm going to learn how to do it, and I'm going to go do it. And then I thought that that's who I was. And I think it was COVID because there was nowhere you could go.
You had to sit down.
So you had to sit down and sit with yourself. Because people ask me to this day, there's no way in the world I would have retired if it wasn't for COVID.
Okay, so you mentioned that mentor piece. Like, how huge do you think it is for somebody coming into corporate America to find mentors, and like, how would you give them advice on how to find mentors? Because like, I hadn't had this, but maybe once or twice, where somebody younger who came to me and was just like, hey, will you be my mentee? Because like, it's kind of awkward. Like I don't even know if I really have, say, like a mentor. I do have individuals I feel like I can call for advice, but it's not like we said, hey, we're going to meet once a month and kind of talk about what you're doing and where you want to go. What advice would you give someone coming into corporate, how to find?
It's super important. I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for mentors. And they come in and out of your life as moments of time. So you have to decide whether or not that some of these people are people who are there for a moment or they're there that will always be. You know what I mean? And for me, it started when I was in the 7th grade. And there was an opportunity for, young Black girls to be in a program called MOST. And it was called Motivating Our Students Through Excellence. And it was basically Black women who were in corporate America who took on 7th graders and basically taught us everything. And so that was my first real mentor, and her name was Mrs. Tucker, and she's still a mentor in my life.
Wow.
Right?
It's powerful.
And so that's kind of someone who stayed around. I think it's important to have mentors that are organic. If you're forcing it, then it's weird. So I kind of associate it as like dating. You're like, if there's somebody you don't want to date anymore, right? So you have to make sure that they're getting something out of it and you're getting something out of it. And so when I became an officer, I was like a deer in the headlights. And there's 2 people who have since retired, and I was fortunate that they were both people of color. But it was Daria Beckham, who retired as a former VP of home decor for Walmart, and then David Ortiz, who was the VP of outdoor living. We were all in the same division. And I started, and we would sit in meetings, and I felt like I always needed to give like my opinion. And we were in one meeting, and there was 2 people, 2 VPs, they were going at it, right? And I leaned in to say something, and I looked over at David, and he was like, right? And I was like, okay. And then I was like, and then I looked over at Daria, she crossed her and she kind of just sat back like this.
Yeah.
Right? And then her nickname for me became Cookie. So it's either they called me Cookie or they called me like Young Buck.
Yeah.
Which I never really knew that because in my mind, black don't crack. Yeah. So you never know how old people are. Yeah. So I just assumed we were all around the same age. Yeah. Till this day, I didn't know that I was like 10 or 15 years younger than most of these people. Yeah. And they were always like, they called me Young Buck, which I was like, I couldn't really call them Odie Buck Goodies because that would not work, right? Or she would call me Cookie. Yeah, so she would always be like, Cookie, that's not your fight. Yeah. Cookie, why are you in that mess? Yeah. Cookie, you ain't never going to get that job, right? Okay. And so it was people like that kind of, like she would literally, and you don't know her, but I would go in and she had a chair, and she would make me sit in the chair. Yeah. We were peers. Right? And I sat in the chair that all her people sat in the chair. So when she wanted to talk to me, I sat in that chair. Right? You know what I mean? And so there's always been someone kind of guiding me. I'm not saying I did everything right. Yeah. But sometimes I took it, sometimes I didn't. Yeah. But I was always, one of the things about me is I'm really good at like introspective and holding myself accountable. Yeah. I might be pissed off in the moment and might not take it, but then I go home and I'll be like, okay, well maybe they were right. You know what I mean? Yeah. And people have always said, wow, your reflection is like quick and on the spot. And so what I had to work on is my immediate reaction, but my perspective, which is why I was able to kind of, I think, like get a lot of roles, was because I would go back and I would be like, you know what? All right, I didn't do that right.
Yeah. I think sometimes we get. Oh, go ahead. You got it. Yeah, I think sometimes too when we're getting feedback, we sometimes let our feelings cloud the facts. Yeah. And so, like when you said, like let me take a moment and go over the conversation in my head and take out my feelings and like, or what they're saying, factual. Yeah. And also too, I got to have the ability to self-assess and know. Yeah. Who I am and take it. But what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say the theme of what you've really been talking about is in your career is being mentored. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like someone who's had the career that you've had on this side? Do you feel like mentoring is an obligation of yours, and what does that look like?
100%. Like for me, it was, I'll tell a story. I won't say his name, but one of my bosses. Like our touch base was always at like 5:00 on like a Thursday, and boyfriend was like done working, and so like every time I would come into his office, he was like watching ESPN, right? And it was perfect because I played sports, so we would talk and stuff like that, and then he would always come back from behind his desk, and then we'd go sit at his table, right? You know what I mean? And we would just catch up, but it was mostly of him kind of saying things to me like he taught me really, like, strategically how to handle my money, what to do with my money. Sometimes he would tell me what he thought I should do, and sometimes I would listen, sometimes I wouldn't, right? And so one of the things I've been trying to do is for a lot of women of color and men of color is teaching them strategically what to do with their money. Okay. Right? Because as a senior manager or a manager, you're getting stock options, you're getting these bonuses, and people are trying to live like, they're trying to live like, I mean, like they don't know, like up until I was like a director, like, I drove like a 10-year-old like Land Rover. Like, I had a Land Rover, but it was like 10 years old, right? And so like, what I'm trying to do is teach people about choices, right? And because a lot of people was like, well, how did you learn how? It was like, if you have the opportunity to be in a room where someone who's more important than you, maybe on paper, is choosing to give you some information, it's up to you to decide whether or not you're going to listen. Yeah. And you know this about me. I listen to everything, right? I might think a lot of it is full of poo, but I'm going to take it in. Yeah. And then I'm going to go in, and if somebody wants to help me and tell me what I need to do, I might be like, okay, but I'm probably going to do it. You know what I mean? And a lot of times it's about the opportunity to be in the room. And so that's what I'm trying to say. I have a good friend who's, she's up there, and she should have figured out a few things more in life than she has. And it's like, you can only keep saying, hey, like I got like, school loans. And I was like, didn't he rescind the school loans. You know what I mean? But like, what are you doing with your money? Like, because a lot of times financial independence gives you the opportunity to create a narrative and make a change that you wouldn't if you didn't have it.
Yeah.
So one of the things as you talk about, and it's been a thought of mine for quite some time, is I think that's kind of one of the next waves that we're in as a community. Is when you went back, it was, well, go to school.
Yeah.
You go to school, you do this, you get a good job. But I even know, for me, starting my corporate career, my parents didn't come from corporate.
Right.
So there was nobody to teach. It was like, hey, you got an allowance, but there was no advance in, okay, you got stocks, you got these. So I feel like that's the next thing for our community, is really mastering, okay, now people are going and they're doing these things that sound great and look great on paper, but they don't know how to, take care of, the responsibilities and the finances that comes with it.
Yeah.
Well, know, I mean, it's my biggest thing is this whole idea of generational wealth, specifically in the Black community, right? So, like, it's 2025, right? If you, just on paper, we're the most educated, Black women and Black men, right? I mean, which is the whole reason why we're in the situation that we're in right now, is because they don't have the numbers. If they're not graduating from college and they're choosing to do a trade, right, and they don't have a seat at the table, then we become a part of the narrative that they're afraid of, right? Because as their numbers continue to reduce, then, but here's the thing is, so then what are you doing to teach someone else and bring someone up behind you? So part of my responsibility is I thought about it for a long time. I was like, listen, people are like, how do you leave a job like Walmart? You're making millions. Like, how do you do that? And I was like, very planned before I left, right? Where I got a whole bunch of white people around me who are my financial people. And I was like, do I have enough money?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes or no? Yeah.
Yes or no?
Yeah.
And they're like, well, and I was like, so what does that mean exactly? So, and I had to go through what does this account mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? And I'll tell you, I'm learning where we just were not in those conversations before.
For sure.
And when you have it, it opens up more doors, right? And so I think that's been a part of why I have that pillar, my community pillar.
Okay, yeah.
Is figuring out a way to give back, where I can bring more small businesses up. I can educate them more. Right now I have a media kit. So I'm doing media kits for small Black business owners because the way they're promoting themselves are not great. Right? So what can I do to teach? And, I was at the Black Owned Fair, and there was another girl who had reached out to me on LinkedIn, and she has some services that she's trying to. So I said to her, you know what? Next Up has a small business program, right, for $1,500, right? You can join this and get access to thousands of people. But if you don't know what to do and you don't have a seat at the table, so it's my whole goal is how can I give away as much money, whether it's services, so that I can give other people a seat at the table. And the only way I was able to do that is because, honestly, I work for Walmart, I work for Macy's, I started in this business, and I was able to invest my money through mentors and different things. Now, granted, I didn't listen to all the things that they did, because, they were trying to, like, back in the day when I first started investing, they were like, are you doing too much? How many houses? I think 2 houses are enough. Like, do you really need to do 5?
Speaking of, I want to take it back before we get there. Like, how did you get from LA to New York?
So I'll tell you exactly how I went. So I graduated an executive trainee, and I started working for a company called Robinson's May, and I was part of the May department stores. So I worked in LA literally for 8 years. May company got bought out by Macy's. And so they gave, which is crazy, 7 buyers a job in San Francisco from the Los Angeles office, and I was one of them. So I moved to San Francisco, and at the time, they didn't really know what to do with me, because I, at the time, was kind of creating my own supplier structure. And they were like, well, we don't have what you did in LA. at that store in San Francisco. Can you do it? So for the first year, I sat in a room and I just created a moderate department for Macy's.
Okay.
Because they didn't have it.
Wow.
So then once I did that and that started to work, they were like, well, we have something unique and different that we want you to do. And I was like, okay, what is that? They're like, well, we have some higher profile like designers that we want to launch some brands.
Okay.
And we want you to do what you did in Moderate and what you did in LA. Now we want you to do it like, and I was like, well, who are these people? They're like, well, we're launching Tommy Hilfiger.
Okay.
Right. We're launching Oscar de la Renta. We're working with Isaac Mizrahi. And you know me, I was at the time, because when I moved I just turned 30.
Okay.
So I moved to San Francisco, and I was kind of like, okay, these were very interesting people to work with. Very difficult.
Yeah.
High, like potential was high.
Yeah.
And it kind of didn't bother me for some reason. And people could not understand. They was like, you got this young black girl from LA, and she's close with Tommy Hilfiger, and she's launching brands left and right. So then Macy's decided that they didn't want to, that they were closing all their regional offices and moving everyone to New York.
Okay.
And then they hired 6 buyers. And I was one of the 6.
Okay.
Yeah, look
But
at
at
you.
the time, my mentor, Martha, from the LA called me. She wasn't at Macy's. She called me and said, hey, Twilla, I know they want you to go to New York to work for Macy's and do what you're doing, but I think you should do something different. And I was like, well, what do you want me to do? And she was like, there's this company called Walmart. And I was like, what's that?
Yeah.
And they were like, well, they're moving their offices to New York, and they need help with launching brands.
Okay.
And they're working with Neil Cole, who's Kenneth Cole's brother.
Yeah.
And who owns Iconics, and they need someone to help launch Starter and Danskin, and I gave them your name, and the reason why they gave my name is because I launched Oscar de la Renta and Isaac Mizrahi, which was owned by Iconics, and Neil Cole is somewhat difficult, but he's brilliant.
Yeah.
And I had a good relationship with him.
Okay.
So I was like, well, I don't know what Walmart is. And so I was like, I don't think so. So then, and she's like, I don't know if the recruiters are going to call you. So they called me 3 days later, and they're like, we're really interested. And I was like, I don't really know what Walmart is.
Yeah.
So then I was like, well, let me go do some research.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I like to do research.
Yeah.
So I drove from San Francisco in the marina to like San Jose, because that was where the closest Walmart was.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not working. Like, I didn't get out of the hood to go back to the hood.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And they were like, because it was like rough.
Well, we got a lot
Like,
more
I was
stores now
I
these
was
days,
like,
but yeah.
I was like, I'm gonna. So I was like, I don't know. And then they were like, no, you should really read about. So they were like, read about Sam Walton. So I read the Cliff Notes for his book, and I was like, this cat, like, he's something
Go get
special,
it. Yeah.
right? And I was like, well, maybe. So then I went online. And then they hired me to. So then they wanted to hire me, and I was like, no. And so then I was like, well, I will only take this amount of money. I was like making it up.
Yeah.
Because I was like, these people, they don't know me, they don't care, and I was trying to use them to compete with Macy's.
Race. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
So
Get a little leverage.
yeah,
Yeah.
I
Like,
get
like,
it.
yeah.
So I went back to Macy's, and the GMM was like, we're not giving you more money.
Yeah.
And I was like, but I'm moving from San Francisco to New York. It costs more money.
Yeah,
Like, it's like 35% more to work here. She was like, well, in a nice way, she was like, you should be lucky you have a job. So then I was like,
I've heard that before.
so then I was like, all right, well, I would like to decline your offer and say thank you for everything.
Yeah.
Right? So then I called Walmart and I took the job. And they were like, perfect. We'll send you your signing bonus.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay. Sure, whatever that means. So then the president of Macy's called me because he was the president of the regional in San Francisco, but he got promoted. And his name was Jeff Gannett, who I had a good. And he said, well, what's going on? And I was like, well, I asked for like $10,000 more, and she was like, Like, she had a funky attitude.
Yeah.
And she was like, no, da-da-da. And he was like, well, if it's $10,000 that you want, like, we'll give it to you. And I was like, yeah, but I don't want to work for her. And he was like, well, no, we'll move you to a different area. And I was like, well, where were you? And I was like, I can't, like, I've already signed the contract. And he was like, well, I was like, I can't go back on my name. And everyone knows that, like, once I make a decision. And then when I got home, there was a FedEx on my door. And it was from Walmart. I was like, what is this? I opened it up, and it was a check.
Ready from Walmart.
And I was like, and I kind of looked around like, like, who does this, right? So then I took the job. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's how I got to New York.
Yeah, I know when we started making the decision to move people from New York to Northwest Arkansas, like, you went from, a city to another city, and now a city to Northwest Arkansas.
I said no 3 times.
Wow.
Oh,
Like, Andy Bear was like, Twila, we want you to take this job. I said no. And I didn't even have a job, y'all. I was just from, right? He was like, what do you do? I was like, I don't know. I was like, I'll go back to LA.
yeah.
I was interviewing with TJ Maxx, right, and Marshalls. They had an office out there because of everything that happened with 9/11.
Okay, yeah.
And then I was also interviewing with JCPenney's in Dallas, and they really wanted me, and they wanted to give me a promotion, like a director role. And I was like, oh, okay, this is really good. And so I told Andy, I said, I think I'm going to take this director role in Dallas. And he was like, well, Twila, if you're going to move to Dallas and you don't know anything about this company, but you like this company, why wouldn't you move here? And I said, well, it's not a director role.
Okay.
And so he was like, just go down and meet some people. And I was like, but they rolled out the red carpet. That was before Crystal Bridges had opened. And what they didn't know is, just in case, because everybody was trying to find housing, I wouldn't put a deposit on like an apartment. And I bought a car.
Okay.
But they didn't know this. Walmart didn't know this. Right, because I was still negotiating.
Yeah.
And so, like, everybody's talking to me. And they're like, that's not the way Walmart works. You can't just be like, you're going to be a director. They're like, you have to show your, like, that, like, you believe in them. And I was like, okay. And they were like, just sign on. And he was like, so Andy's like, just sign on. I promise you I'll take care of you.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, Andy, I'm going to sign on for you as a senior merchant, but I truly believe I should be a director. But I'm going to sign on. You guys know 2 weeks later, after I signed on, I got a call that when I came down here, that I was going to be a director of gymnastics.
Oh, good.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it is. That is.
Yeah, so then I was like, I'm going.
Yeah. Now, was it like a culture shock? Like,
yes.
Yeah, like,
Yeah, but
when you got here, were you like, okay, I got this director role, but I'm only finna be here for about 2 years.
Oh yeah, I had a plan.
Yeah.
I had 2 years. So we did a lot of stuff. Like 85 of us moved down, and we were all super tight. So we hung out all the time. Wow. We moved our softball team down here. We got Walmart to pay for our softball team, like, because they paid for it in New York. Yeah. So we did a whole bunch of stuff to try to. I mean, like, we spent every weekend together. When we moved down here, there was really no downtown. You still had to sign. It was definitely a culture shock. But we had a really good network. Yeah. I had some, a couple of things happen internally, because at the time, you guys, I really didn't understand. When I moved down here, I was 34. Okay. And I was a director, so I just assumed that everybody at 34 was a director.
No, ma'am.
No. I'm not going to get into it too much, but it was different. Yeah. And there was quite I had a run-in with someone. Okay. That basically, in a nice way, told me that I needed to get in line.
Because that was going to be one of my questions I was going to ask you, just in your career, like, as a woman and as a Black woman, how many obstacles do you feel like you had to overcome? I've had,
I had a situation at Macy's where, because I was doing so well, and I had and I knew it had to do because I was a Black woman. Yeah. I was doing so well, and all of the presidents, and like, I had a really good relationship with Tommy Hilfiger, and the president, that my boss had a problem with the fact that she wasn't being seen. Yeah. And they would call me to negotiate with me. And it was the first time that I had someone try to set me up, basically to, take the fall or something. Yeah. But I got a call from the president of Liz Claiborne, and said to me, "Hey, I just want to give you a heads up. Like, I think your boss is coming for you." So I went to her boss and I told her, and said, "Hey, we have a situation. I got this weird call. I don't know how to deal with it." And it was early before a walkthrough. So I got in like 6:00 in the morning because I knew that my GMM got in at like 6:30. I waited, I did that, and then I called the assistant and I was like, "Hey, does Jackie have 20 minutes for me?" I told her the situation. She called in my boss and I was able to nip that one in the bud. And then they moved me to another area. I had 2 situations at Walmart. One was straight up another setup. But if you know me, you know, being an athlete, I'm super punctual.
Yeah.
I'm always where I want to be, I'm supposed to be, and I'm really good at follow-up.
Yeah.
Right? So another setup was that I was in New York, and I showed up late, and that I basically made my team start all over, and the showroom start all over, and I was super rude.
Yeah.
Right? And my boss, who was not at the time on my side, probably never on my side, tried to set me up. Come to find out that the girl who was the rep was a merchant at Walmart before it moved to New York, and they were super close. But I knew that it wasn't the truth because I happened to get there early before everybody else, and I got there early, and they're like, "You're early," and they were like, "Do you want to sit in the conference room?" I was like, "Yeah," and the president of that company came in, and we talked for 20 minutes, and we were just shooting the shit. So this is how I know I am blessed, right? And so I was like, "What situation are you talking about?" When they took it to the GMM, and at the time, Mary Beth, who's an advocate, I said that didn't happen. And she was like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, "I have proof." And I said, "You can call the president of the company." And she was like, "What do you mean?" I said, "If they're talking about that particular date," because here's the thing, if you're going to say multiple times, and then you call out a particular date, and then I have a particular date.
Receipts. Yeah, receipts. Yeah, we call them. Yeah.
There's always receipts. So I've always been at a point where I've never actually, the only time I've had to be talking to quite a bit because there are certain things that I could say that I couldn't say that other people could say.
Yeah.
So I got in trouble for one thing where we would have open to buy once a month, and we would have to come together. And Jeff Evans, who was a GMM, he called it open to cry. We called it open to cry in New York. You know, it was just like open to cry. So I used open to cry in my team meeting, and someone who was not an advocate of me went and told my boss, and I got in trouble. And so I quickly realized that there's certain things, unfortunately, that I couldn't do that other people could do. Call it, and it's a true double standard.
It is.
I had to stay away from the ABF, you know, the Angry Black Woman syndrome.
Yep.
You know what I mean? But the thing about me that no one could ever say that I wasn't on time, that I wasn't prepared. And if one of those two is because I'm sick, which rarely, I'm never sick, right? And that I didn't follow up on something.
Okay.
There's got to be something wrong with me. And even to this day, it's a good trait of mine. And it has to do, it goes back to, listen, I was on scholarship to play softball. If I was supposed to be somewhere, you had to be somewhere.
Yeah.
And so, but it's always been, you know, I recognize I was the first Black woman ever to be the VP of men's, right? So having to deal with a lot of those people, you know, so I recognize I was the first vice president to be the African American officer, you know, and here's the thing, I got pushback not only from white people, but from my own people. I've had people come to me and say when I got that job and they'd be like, "Well, how'd you get this job?" And I'll be like, "Well, I was told that Doug wanted me to have this job." And the quote that came back was, "Well, we shouldn't get into a habit of having the president of our company pick our leader." And you know what my response was? "Well, it's my job. And if you want it in 2 years, let's see if they nominate you."
Now, do you think this, like, the state of, like, Black women has improved since you started, or like, do you feel like we're going back because of the time that we're in right now? Like,
well, see, it depends because I've been out of it for 2 years, but I know that there are a lot of African American officers, right? The opportunity is they're all at the VP level, right? So there's opportunity at the SVP level, you know. So if you think about it, right, like when I left, you know, it wasn't just Latrice. You had Kelvin, you had Dakota, you know what I mean? You had quite a few. I mean, I think there's two, you know, or Latrice might be the only one. I feel like I might be missing it, you know what I mean? And so but there are a lot at the VP level.
Yeah.
I think the opportunity is there's not as much at the director and senior director level. So what happens is internally they're having to go out to find that. And then when they go out, then you have to do like talent acquisition. You got to get people to come here. But then when they come here, they're going to be successful because no one really wants to help them.
Here's my caveat to that. And I've been having discussions with individuals as I'm trying to go from senior manager to director.
Yeah.
You hear them say, well, we want somebody with director experience. And I was like, that's not how our hierarchy is set up. There's no senior manager positions that has direct reports. So how can we promote internally if that's not how our hierarchy is set up? And so that's probably an excuse for them to go outside and bring.
It can be. And then or what they do is they'll say they want you to take on additional work or additional projects to prove, you know, to prove that you should, you know, to do that. Because before I became a director, when I was a senior manager, I was helping to, you know, with other areas where I was taking on direct reports that were official direct reports, even though I had two. You know, but I was getting what they call now Make a Difference awards. I was getting those awards, right? So it a lot of times, if you don't have someone that has a seat at the table and it's turning so fast, you know, it's so hard. So I find myself literally when the diversity and inclusion announcement came out about what happened with Walmart, I was on the phone all night and the next day. With Walmart people. I don't even work for Walmart. 2 weeks ago, I was at Walmart, right, meeting because I also do the Bentonville Film Festival, but working on community initiatives, pushing this inclusive festival, and I literally was meeting with Doug, with Donna, and Doug's like, Twilight, you have to meet with Dan. Then I got to take him through, give the history, say what he needs to do. Now, okay, Twilight, we want you to meet with Cindy. Can you come take these trips? And I was like, you know, I don't work for you. Right? Did you miss that? I was like, now, fortunately for me, I got deferred comp, right? But if y'all want me to do a little bit more, you're going to have to figure out. So then Doug was like, well, we can kind of set you up. And I was like, but I don't really want to. Right? You know what I mean? Because I have my own company.
Right?
You know what I mean? And so, but I will never be the person that stops trying to make it better. Because I do believe in this community, and the people in this community.
Talk to me a little bit about the balance between understanding your value, you know, as an employee, and understanding the point in time when you're not seeing that value reciprocated. Because I think that's a lot of what this conversation is. Because what you talked about earlier is like, we've been, hey, you need to get to this, to this, to this. You need to make this much. And sometimes it's like, why am I trying? It's like the dating thing. Like, why am I trying to be with somebody who doesn't want to be with me?
And I think as you get older, your value, how you equate that value changes as well. Right. You know, for me at the time, you know, because even when Walmart asked me to stay, they were like, what do you get, $1 million? I was like, I already have $1 million. And I was like, well, you know me more than that. You know that this is not about money. And I think for COVID, what I had to figure out is that my value changed. And so, you know, I went through where, you know, it was tough when COVID happened and everything that happened with George Floyd and then Black Lives Matter. And then, you know, the African American Officer Caucus played a vital role of helping, which I do appreciate, which I think, well, which I even said to him, you know, if I was working for him directly, I would always work for him. And, you know, I think Doug is a very unique leader where he's open and he wants to learn. And so I spent a lot of time with him and with Judith, who's no longer there, and with Dan, and when Donna came on, where they were like, all right, help us be better. And I was figuring out that a part of them helping be better is I needed to say for myself, if I'm helping the company align on community and what's right, am I doing what's right for myself? And, you know, we had transitioned leadership and a new leadership had come in, and I felt like I was more of a politician and not an entrepreneur. And there was so much politics into what I was doing, and I felt like I was slowly giving away a little bit of myself. And I was like, so then I kind of felt like, it's funny you brought it up, like, was I being an imposter? Right? And I just was like, there's got to be something else, because this is not doing it for me.
How do we balance as African Americans, as Black people, like, one, help and educate, but then telling them, like, you need to go do your own research too, like, where, you know what I'm saying, like, because we get tired of having the same conversation. Like, I don't mind you asking me questions, but, like, go look for yourself too. Like,
the problem is right now is it's like they don't, well, not everyone, but we're in this with the leadership that we have running and the climate. It's like, you know, like I read something where like an interview resurfaced and said about, you know, slavery and everything, and it was kind of like, well, can't they just get over it? And you can't get over anything that is abundance and become a part of your existence. That tailored the life that you have, the way you react, the access that you have. And I think that that's the hardest part that people don't understand, is that it's more than just the color of your skin. It's your being. It's who you are. It's every day how you wake up, how you come. And I think you want to be able, if you find someone that's willing to listen and willing to do the work, I'll educate all day long. But I also have to say that I don't have all the answers. And my problem is I felt like I was becoming the voice of 400,000 Black people. And my problem that I have is, you know, they see this, you know, fair-skinned girl from Los Angeles, and a lot of people that are from the South, they don't want to hear anything that I got to say.
They don't relate
because so, but doesn't mean that I'm not going to do it. And so I just got to a point where I said, you know, how much is too much? How much money do you need where you are completely removed from reality? You know what I mean? And you can't help. And I honestly, you know, I don't think that I would have been able to go to UC Santa Barbara, play softball, if I was white. Does that make sense? Meaning that, like, the opportunity that I got, the grades, where I came from, you know, now I was, keep in mind, I was a damn good, I was All-American. And a lot of people, most people didn't have my statistics, but I truly believe that somebody had to do something in order for me to get to where I was. So it's my job to make sure that I'm doing something so that somebody else can come from behind me. And I think that that's important. And what's happening is they're saying they're trying to level the playing field, but the playing field is never going to be leveled because we're never going to have the same color skin. So, and I think that that's the reality and the abundance that I live with every day.
And I don't like the fact that they say slavery. Like, civil rights movement was that far. Like, we didn't have rights back then. You know what I mean?
Well,
like,
the whole thing is crazy. I mean, we can get into the
we can. But
South American. He's South African. He came here illegally. We can talk all day.
But I also want to talk a bit about your company now. Like, one, how did you come up with a name, and where is your company today, and where do you want to see it going in the future?
So when I left Walmart, I was like, I'm out. Right. So I went to LA and I was like, I'm not going to do anything. And then I was doing a lot of investing in real estate and like building houses. And I had a really good friend named Dave Morris, who is like, he's like my brother. And he has a show on HGTV and he's built many companies. And Walmart had approached them to do a line. And so he was like, we don't know what we're doing. He was like, can you help us? And I was like, I don't know if I can help you. Because legally, like, I got to, you know what I mean? And I was like, I'm not trying to piss off the people that are going to pay me. So I reached out to, because of my relationship, I reached out to John Ferner and then Anthony Sue, who was no longer here. And I said, hey, you guys are getting ready to do this. They approached me to help. Are you okay if I help? And Anthony was like, let me ask John. He texted me back. He was like, give me a call. Because, give me a call. And he was like, we would prefer you did it because then we would know what we're getting and we trust you. So then I started doing that and I was full blown into helping them. Yeah. Like, I was like, man, I just love Walmart. Like, I was full blown into helping them and helping them build their brands. Like, and they had already had a social media presence. Like Jenny had a big following on social media. Dave was starting his following. They had some other little small brands and they were like, and I said, well, if you're going to do this, we got to build up your overall brand. Yeah. Walmart is just a pillar of so many different things. Right. And so we went into a full launch. We rebranded them. We opened them up so that they could have more partnerships. They were doing a little bit, not a lot of it. Worked on launching this, and Dave and Jenny were like super like guarded about their family, but they're super talented. Yeah. That they were like, we have an opportunity here. Mm-hmm. So then we created their Mars Mercantile together, and the thing that was amazing about them is they were very open to like, what do you think? Yeah. Okay. Right, but they were also like, this is our brand. Yeah. So it was like 3 or 4 of us, and we created a social media digital presence. Really, honestly, I learned a lot from them about how to the importance of digital media. Yeah. And at the time, because they had come through COVID. Yeah. So, but then I was spending all of my time with them. Yeah. And I was like, if I wanted to do that, I would stay at Walmart. And make more money. Right? Yeah. And then, so I went to them, and they were really gracious, and they were like, all right. I said, but I'll give you a year because I got to figure out, I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah. And then the Bentonville Film Festival approached me and they were like, hey, we have some opportunity with strategy, with our relationship with Walmart, our social media, our marketing, our PR. Yeah. We need your help. And I was like, I don't know. Yeah. And I was like, I have no money. So then I was like, let me just sit back and help you with a few things and we'll see. And good relationship with Jason and Wendy. They ironically live in Brentwood where I kind of grew up. So I was like, okay. Yeah. So got into a really good relationship with them. And then I started to get other people. And then we start working on media partnerships. And I was like, I might want to do this. Yeah. So then I worked with my lawyer. I was already working on my trust. And then I was coming up with my companies. I had already needed to come up with an LLC for my properties. Okay. And then my lawyer had suggested that I do something completely separate for Dave and Jenny so that it's not a part of my company. So that way it goes directly, and also plausible deniability, just in case they get sued, right? So I was like, okay. So then we coming up with a name. Yeah. I wanted to use my name, Brooks, but that's a pretty common name. Yeah. And I came up with all kind of, and then I was like TLB, which my initials are TLB. Okay. That didn't work. Yeah. So then I was like, what if we do a spinoff of my name, Lynette? So Lynette Properties, right? Okay. And then Lynette Developing. Developing came out of Dave and Jenny's company as Mars Developing. Yep. Okay. So that's where that came from. So anything that I had to do with them. And then I always remember that the reason why I got a lot of promotions was because most people said, wow, you're really creative and you're really innovative. So I came up with Lynette, Create, and Innovate. Okay. So that's how it came about. Yeah. And then, me, I love a good spin on an initial. So I was like, LCI. Yeah. And then I was like, and consultants. Yeah. And they were like, what consultancy? I was like, I ain't got no. It just sounds good. Yeah. But now we have, 6 people. Okay. We've worked with over 25 clients. Okay. We have 8 to 10 clients right now, and we're getting ready to add 2. So I just added 2 more people to my team. So within that team, we have marketing and social. I have a creative person who actually, Bethany, who worked for me when I was at home. Yeah. And so she does all my creative and sourcing. Oh my gosh. I have an events person, and then I just hired another strategy person because I was losing my mind. Yeah. So I was literally, someone would reach out to me and say, hey, I want to talk to you. Yeah. And I was like, in the beginning, it was like a lot of free lunches and free breakfast. Because I was like, I'm retired. I was like, you want to take me to lunch? Blake Street, please. Yeah. But then I was the person that was meeting with them, figuring out what they want, coming up with the idea, creating a deck, and then the strategy, and then going back to pitch. So now I have a strategy person that I can talk to that will help me create the deck.
Yeah.
And I'm still forward facing. I still need like probably, but then I'm also like trying to keep my overhead down because I want to be able to. And then what I love about the team is they get incentives, right? So if they bring in clients, they get incentives, right? They get they also have an opportunity to get bonuses, right? And so and Sophia has been with me for 4 years, and then obviously Bethany known each other off and on for 10 years, and then we just added 3 more people.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah. Do you see yourself adding more people like in the near future? Like, how big do you think your team?
Oh, I don't know. So for me, it all depends on which my accountant starts laughing at me because he lectured me. He told me I needed to spend more money. I was like, I did. He's like, but you're making money. So I'm always like, I always like my profit, my revenue, my SG&A, and he was like, you don't work for Walmart anymore. I was like, but still. So it depends. So what I did was I do a strategy meeting in fourth quarter to figure out how many clients do I have on the roster going into the next year.
Yep.
So for the first 6 months, if I feel like I have a lot of clients for the roster coming in, then I decide if I'm going to give, they all get Christmas bonuses. So then they get their Christmas bonuses and then I decide if they're going to get their raises. And then it just so happens that a few of the clients who had worked with me in the beginning of the year have now re-upped, who I didn't work with at the end, but they had projects.
Yeah.
And so now sometimes I bring people on as project space.
Okay, got you.
Because you really want them to all be consultants, so I don't have to pay their taxes. And so that's why it's LCI and consultants.
Can't forget that part.
Yeah.
This is the cookout, so I'll have a couple questions to ask you before we go. One.
Yeah.
What are you putting on your plate at the cookout? Like your to-go plate. What are you putting on your plate?
Well, a lot of people make fun of me because I don't eat meat. But hopefully, I got to know who made it. But there's going to be some mac and cheese.
Okay.
But I got to
essential.
Okay.
I got to look at
Speaking of mac and cheese,
right person.
speaking of mac and cheese, one of my friends asked this question yesterday, and I didn't have an answer for him. Who has the best mac and cheese in Northwest Arkansas?
That's I don't.
Because I told him I didn't know. I was like, man, I don't know.
There was I forget. We had a food truck, a soul food truck, that came to my holiday, and it's not food therapy, but he has a really good mac and cheese. And then I love sweet potato pie. Okay. So, but I gotta look at.
Gotta know mate.
Right.
Hey,
so that's
gonna play about
that's a must.
Yeah.
And then listen, I love like really good sticky like barbecue wings.
Okay.
Like I want it to be the ones where like if you don't have to know where you're at,
okay, you know,
it ain't gonna happen.
It ain't gonna happen. Okay.
So those are like my 3 staples that I love. And then like every time I go to Dave's house, mostly because him and one of his me and one of his sons, we eat the same way because he doesn't eat a lot. He makes this really good like miso salmon.
Okay.
Yeah. I do love a miso salmon.
I can get down on some salmon.
Yeah.
Me too.
But like, and my mom, she still won't tell us, but I think it's sugar, but I don't know. But like, she makes really good potato salad.
Okay.
But she's getting up there, right? So
she got to share the recipe sooner or later, right?
Well, yeah, I think my sister has it. But I just think it's sugar.
Yeah.
Because, you get that sweet, you get that bite or whatever, but it takes her forever to make anything now because she's getting up there in age. But,
what's something that you miss from home food-wise, being from the West Coast?
Oh, well, see,
feel like you can't.
I love Mexican food. Like, if I wasn't black, I'd be Mexican.
Okay.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, I love being some really good, like, enchiladas.
Okay.
Which is why I'm always in Mexico.
Okay.
So I love some good enchiladas.
Yeah. Okay.
And then, like, listen, like, chilaquiles with the green sauce.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I still, not to mention, I still fly back and forth to go to the Dodger games.
Yeah. Speaking of, I'll be in LA in May, so I'm gonna try to catch a game if they're in L. So I feel like I'm a West Coast guy. We've had this conversation
we talked about this.
I feel like I'm a West Coast.
They have keeping, and that's the thing that I do now is that one of the things is I don't want to work to live. I want to live to work. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so, like, I don't work in July.
Yeah.
I take the month of July off.
Oh, yeah.
And then we take off December 15th through January 15th.
What's up? Yeah, it is.
So now my team in July, because they need to get paid.
Yeah. They're like, we got bills.
Yeah, we got bills. Yeah.
But then I give them the time off for Christmas and holidays. And so what I'm trying to do is, and then if I feel like we have so much, we have the meetings to be like, do we have too much going on? Like last week we had a lot going on, and I was like, all right, we're not working today.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm going to do a massage.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm trying to make sure that I find that balance. And I want people to be happy with what they do.
Yeah.
And then, and a lot of the stuff that they know how to do, honestly, I don't know how to do. And they're 24. Yeah. Like the social stuff
But that's why you hire. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'll just be like, oh, that's good.
Yeah.
But I don't know how to do it. So it's been fun. Like we have like a bunch of alcohol companies. We have a tech company now.
Okay.
That, we have quite a few marketing companies. And so, so obviously Dave and Jenny, not as much with them anymore.
Yeah.
But, anytime I have an opportunity for them, I reach out to them. Yeah. And so it's been good. It's been very, I felt incredibly blessed. Thank you so much for letting me be a part of this.
No, thank you for sitting down here and spreading the wisdom. Yeah. Also, too, what are one or two things that you want a young black, or it could be male too, or just someone who's starting their career, some nuggets for them to take
I would
away?
say if you're starting your career, right, like it's okay to keep your head down. Okay. Right, for a little bit, and maybe observe more than you say.
Okay.
Right, that was really good for me to kind of be like, hey, all right, and then, but still speak up.
Okay.
Right, but really take in a lot. What would be number one? Number two, I wish I had, the other part that you don't know about me is I was in extreme debt when I was 24, 25. And I didn't know that until I had an issue with my roommate and I tried to go get another apartment. And I didn't get it.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I mean, I was in the fives.
Yeah.
Right. And then I took a financial class because I had no choice. And it was in Watts. And they taught me how to start saving, how to pay off my credit cards. I would say if you're young and you're starting out, you don't have to keep up with the Joneses. Yeah. You don't need to go out to eat, stay home for a little bit and start saving some money. Start, if they let you invest in 401k, even if it's 1%, 2%, do that. Start to create a life for yourself so that as you get older, you can make independent decisions that are not based off of financials. Those would be two things that I would tell my young self.
Love it. Also, too, let the people know where they can find you at.
All right.
What's your tags?
All right. So give my tags. I normally have a banner.
We'll put a banner up for you.
But it's www.lanetcreateandinnovate.net.
Okay.
One piece. Say what's the difference between net and .com? How much it costs? So go to my website. Also too on Instagram and Facebook is very easy. It's Lynette Create and Innovate.
Okay.
Or TL Brooks 17 is my personal. We're constantly doing events, and so would love as much support. I'll give you guys information about the events.
Okay, awesome.
And the goal is to do community events. We're doing our next big event. We'll have a bunch of events, but our next holiday market will be on October the 4th.
Okay.
I make sure that I work with Jasmine and Jay, because they go February, August, and then we go after them. Okay. Because it's all about getting additional revenue for these small businesses.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What you got for the people before we get out of here, man?
For me, it's your values not predicated by your job and your title, but self-fulfillment and purpose. Yeah, that's what I got out of this conversation.
That's me too. Same thing. Have some core values about yourself, and don't do just because somebody say you should take this job. You should take this job.
Absolutely.
Understand what your purpose is and what you're passionate about.
Absolutely.
And it's not easy. You'll have to sit with it because a lot of people who they are sometimes is dictated by the title that they had or what they had.
Yeah.
And it takes you a little bit to figure out your identity without it. And I'll tell you, once I left, I was like, who am I? If I'm not the vice president of merchandising for Walmart, who am I?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, we appreciate you coming to the cookout
thank you.
today.
Yeah,
We
appreciate
always
you.
love to have a guest. Hey, remember, at the cookout, we putting more of the food on your plate.
Yes.
Yeah.
We out.
Thank you.